Hello there, I thought I'd jump in front of the camera and do a quick video on book recommendations because I think someone said, are there any books about atheism or non-belief that you can recommend? I think in the comments section for the last video, and I thought, well, I've got a little bit of time today. Why don't I tell people what books I would recommend if you're looking for material that deals with the subject of religion. The first book I would absolutely recommend is this one. It's called The End of Faith and it's by Sam Harris. Sam Harris is a neurologist and he's a very, very good writer and public intellectual, very eloquent speaker if you look up his videos on YouTube. And this is one of his earliest books, if not his first book, basically dealing with religion and exploring the history of religion. So he goes into Islam, he goes into Christianity, he goes into Judaism. He explores the origins of all of the major monotheisms and gives his arguments against faith as a project. And I think of all of the books out there that give the arguments for atheism, this is the best one. A close second on my list would be this book, God Is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. Those of you who follow my videos will know that I'm a big Hitchens fan. He's obviously no longer with us. He died, I think, in 2011. But what an amazing body of work he left behind. His videos on YouTube, because a lot of his lectures and debates found their way onto YouTube, and they continue to inspire me and educate me. But this is the book where he basically wrote his treatise on religion and everything that he'd learned over his life about religion and all of the arguments that he had basically. And I just found it fascinating. Second to The End of Faith by Sam Harris, this would be my main recommendation. I can't really do atheist book recommendations without mentioning The God Delusion. Probably a lot of you would be expecting that to be the first book that I would recommend. I think it's a fantastic book, hence why I'm recommending it. I just find it a little bit hard going. The writer Richard Dawkins, who I'm a huge fan of, I think Richard Dawkins is first and foremost a scientist. He also happens to be quite a good writer and quite a good orator, but science is his main thing. And sometimes the explanations he gives and the way he explains religion in particular can probably come across sometimes as overly precise and overly perhaps even condescending to some. I don't quite see it that way, but I can understand why if you're religious and you're easily offended by having your religion kind of sneered at, I can understand why you would kind of back away a little bit from Richard Dawkins. But the simple truth is he's an extremely intelligent man, and what he knows about evolution in particular and religion is very well worth listening to. It's also useful to know that in The God Delusion there are a few pages devoted to debunking the book Life, How Did It Get Here by Evolution or by Creation, which is a Watchtower book. So if purely from that perspective, if you're a JW, it's worth kind of framing your knowledge of that book in terms of how it's received on the outside world. And when you do your digging and you figure out what outside sources have to say about the creation book, you realise it has been widely debunked. Fourth on my list, although there are arguments for it being first on the list, is Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. Now, I actually read this book while I was still a JW, in fact a number of years before waking up while I was a JW. And what I like about this book is it basically cultivates your love of science. If it's possible for you to appreciate science, this book will really help you to get a basic grasp of it and an appreciation of just how much work has gone in to developing human understanding in a range of scientific fields. And Bill Bryson is probably known to most people as a travel writer, but he approaches the subject of science as though he were writing a travel guide, and he goes through the history of science, introducing you to various luminaries and scientific geniuses who helped further our knowledge in different fields. And just from the point, he doesn't actually really touch on religion. When you read it, you're kind of, is he atheist? Is he a believer? He kind of leaves you guessing on that score, which is actually good if you are a still believing JW, because you're not feeling confronted per se by atheism, you're just having your appreciation of science enhanced. So this is a remarkable book and I can't recommend it enough. Next on my list is a book I've only just bought but can already thoroughly recommend because I'm enjoying it immensely, and that's The Bible for Grownups. It's it's a remarkable book. It's by Simon Loveday, who I think lectures at a university somewhere. He's a literary critic, so he's not necessarily a theologian. He's approaching the Bible as someone who is a book critic by profession, and someone who has basically done his research into what scholars have to say about the Bible, and he brings it all together into one sort of useful resource. So I suppose some people might find the title a little bit condescending, but I just find it remarkable. And just to give you a hint of what it's about, on the back cover, Simon Loveday writes, "How can we read the Bible with our brains in gear? The purpose of this book is to do just that." So again, he brings together what we know about the historicity of the Bible books, the historicity of the writers, how far along the Bible's narrative are things to be believed, where can we draw the line between what history supports and what only the Bible is writing about. It just basically brings all of that together, and written in a really nice style as well, so I can thoroughly recommend this book. Along similar lines is this book, God and Sex, and it's by Michael Coogan, who is editor of the New Oxford Annotated Bible. He too lectures in university, and he's basically a Bible scholar, and he's written this book about all of the biblical references to sex and gender. And I found this an invaluable tool when I was researching my own book, just for getting a feel for, again, the authenticity of the Bible and what it has to say when you really drill down and what certain things mean. So he goes into all of the laws and rules on sex. He speaks a little bit about the Bible times and the culture of the time and what certain things mean in the Bible. So for example, he talks about the fact that whenever it speaks of people being at each other's feet, I think there's a verse in the book of Ruth where Ruth is at the feet of Moab, and that means basically that they had sex. That was like a way of Bible writers saying that they copulated. It really kind of unlocks some of the language of the Bible, and when you're reading it, you're thinking, why couldn't Watchtower literature be so honest and so open about what the Bible has to say? Why does it have to presuppose that everything in the Bible is great, that there's nothing bad being described in the Bible? This book, like the previous book that I showed you, The Bible for Grownups, just takes the Bible at face value and lets the Bible describe itself. So a very, very highly recommended book. Also along the lines of Bible scholarship and getting to grips with the historicity of what's mentioned in the Bible is this book, The Bible Unearthed, which I've actually featured on my channel before, and I've quoted from it, in fact, on one or two discussions. It's just a remarkable book. It's by Israel Finkelstein and Neil Asher Silberman, who are experts on Bible archaeology. And what it does is it helps us to compare history as recorded in the Bible with history as recorded or revealed in archaeology and architecture. So he goes into kind of the chronology of the Bible times and explores things like Exodus and the conquest of Israel in the book of Joshua, and he explains what we know, what archaeology tells us about the claims made in the Bible. Spoiler alert, nothing that's mentioned in Exodus or Joshua or Judges really squares up with archaeology. Basically, the historical record, when you have the kings, that's when the archaeological record and the Bible narrative start to kind of meet together, and we start to see some kind of authenticity emerging. But rather than take it from me, someone who isn't an expert, it's nice to kind of read what experts in the field have to say. And it's worth noting that archaeologists in Israel have tried really, really, really hard to find evidence supporting the events described in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. They haven't found anything. Number 8 on my list is this book, Islam and the Future of Tolerance, a dialogue between Sam Harris and Maajid Nawaz. I just think this is a wonderful book in terms of starting a conversation between two sides that you wouldn't think would have common ground, because Maajid Nawaz identifies as a Muslim and Sam Harris, as we learned before, is an atheist and a very outspoken critic, rightfully so in my opinion, of Islam, specifically the role violent fundamentalist Islam is playing in world events and politics these days. So basically these two guys got together and had a conversation, and we need more conversations nowadays. We need more dialogue between people on opposite ends of the political or religious spectrum. And this book proves that it's possible to have a civilized discourse and to make headway, because during the course of this conversation, Sam Harris was able to broaden his perspective on Islam and understand more the nuances. Basically, he was helped to appreciate that even though the religion of Islam is false, we're not realistically going to see a situation where Islam just goes away. And therefore we have no Islamic terrorism. It's far more realistic to support people like Maajid Nawaz, who are trying to reform Islam from within and make it less threatening and less menacing. So it's a really useful conversation that basically informs your perspective on what's happening in world events today with Islam, particularly violent fundamentalist Islam. There are other books that I could recommend to make up my 10, but rather than talk about them, I'm going to talk about 2 books that I've only just started reading, but which I can already thoroughly recommend to you. Those books are Letter to a Christian Nation by Sam Harris, quite a short book, but basically again dealing with the arguments for atheism in, I think, a very eloquent and easily understandable way. And another fantastic book for you, A Universe from Nothing, which, whoa, this is by Lawrence Krauss, the famed physicist. I'm going to be completely honest, physics is not my forte, but if anyone's going to explain it to me, it's Lawrence Krauss. And if you check out some of his videos on YouTube, again, he's been filmed giving debates and lectures on this very issue, on how the universe first originated and what we've learned so far about the basic structure of reality. You realise that here is a very clever man who is very good at explaining vastly complex things to simple folk like me. So those are my recommendations for you. Again, there's probably more books that I could mention. My way of reading is to, rather than do things logically and start a book and finish a book, I tend to read multiple books at the same time, and I'm very kind of disorganized in that way. So there are other books that I'm kind of trying to get my head around, and don't feel fully confident doing reviews for or recommendations for. But if you enjoy this video, I'll try to do more of them in the future. It would probably be useful to do an XJW book recommendations video, so I'll try to do that at some point. Anyway, that's all I have for you. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and thank you for watching.